Inside of extensions, one of the features that is really important is pivot tables. Unfortunately, pivot tables can't be added to interfaces at the moment, so if you anticipate needing lots of pivot tables for your reporting, then you should use extensions for all of your reporting. You can go ahead and add a new extension called pivot tables. Before we add a pivot table, I also wanted to explain what it is. Pivot tables help you summarize two columns of data and aggregate your values so that you can produce more nuanced summaries of your data. It allows you to get more granular segmentation, which is great. The first pivot table we're going to build is the number of projects by client and also by the status. The table we're going to be pulling from is the projects table. We're going to pick the all projects view. When you set up pivot tables, it's important to be careful about which view you use. Very often, I set up pivot table specific views that are locked so that no one can filter my data differently, and that would mess up the reporting. So instead of using all projects, let's stay with best practices and start a new view for the pivot table. Since this is a pivot table view, I'm going to lock it so that others on my team won't change the filters. As soon as you create the pivot table view, it will show up in the list of views you can select. My row grouping is going to be the client. And my column grouping is going to be the status. Here you can see that the clients have various projects that are underway. You can also see that all of our clients have some projects that have been completed. And there are also new projects that have not been started on yet.
Thanks for investing in your own knowledge base. I'm Cherry Yang, the founder of Claribase. We're going to be releasing our flagship course, Airtable Mastery, for free. In the course, you can find over 100 videos on topics like design, integration, automations, and interfaces. It's perfect for the Airtable champion who wants to build their database right the first time. You can sign up for the course at the link down below.
You also get the subtotals on both the right-hand side and the bottom. Now you can see how this paints a much more granular picture of your data, especially if you want to compare both the client and the project status. Right now, we're doing a count of projects. If you're an experienced spreadsheet user, you'll know that in spreadsheets, you can build more granular pivot tables with multiple levels of categories and segmentation. Inside of Airtable, you're limited to 2 columns to segment by. So you can't do subcategories within the client or subcategories within the status. Once you're happy with the way your pivot table looks, you can go ahead and click Done. Once again, there's an option to duplicate your pivot table, and that's what I'll do next. On the top left of your pivot table, you can go ahead and rename it to something a little more descriptive. I'm naming my number of projects by client and by project status. When I click the drop down, I can duplicate this extension. Once I've duplicated the extension, I'm going to change the number of projects to the estimated budget of these projects. Here, for the summarize by, instead of a count, I'm going to summarize by a specific field. The specific field is going to be the estimated budget. The summary type is going to be the sum. Once I've got that sum here, I can see that in total for all of the projects, it's going to be 115,000. But instead, what's more important to me is the granular reporting of which client is which client is the largest. If we have new projects, what's the value of the new projects and what's the value of our ongoing or completed projects. This is very helpful reporting from a bird's eye view, and I hope you can play around with lots of different options and lots of different ways to segment and report on your data. Inside of pivot tables, another great thing you can take a look at is the show records feature. You can expand a pivot table to full screen, click on any of the numbers that you see, and then show records to the side. For example, when looking at Cherry's Coffee Shop in the completed projects column, you can see 2 projects. And when you click on the number 2, then click on show records, you can see exactly what those records are. This is especially helpful if you have blank columns of data. So for example, if I did not add in a project status for one of my projects, then it's going to be very easy for me to identify which project is missing a status. Back in our projects table, let's remove a couple of the statuses. So I've just removed a couple of project statuses, and now let's go back to see how our pivot table has changed. Now see, John's Guitar Shop has 2 projects that has empty statuses. Again, I can expand the pivot table, click on the 2 empty projects that don't have a status, click on show records, and see exactly what they are. Once you open up the record, you can actually add in a status directly through here. So this is really helpful even from a data backfill perspective to see what might be missing and quickly fill in the missing information. Once I've added in the status for both of those 2 projects, you can see that my pivot table now looks normal and I don't have any new or missing information. To wrap up, pivot tables are such a helpful tool in your toolkit. It's going to really wow your team and executives, and it's just an overall great tool to be able to master how to use. You can build all sorts of segmentation, show granular summaries, and it's just going to help you make better decisions for and with your team.